And we are live. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers Live. My name is Sanderson. I'm your host as always, and joining me as usual is my good friend and colleague, Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Like, outside of some stuff going on with other things in my life, like everything's actually pretty good. Well, going pretty good, I should say. And just excited to be here talking football, talking Broncos as always. And quite honestly, I'm actually a lot more excited because we're 1 week closer to our special guest next week. Having that college coach on, man, I'm super excited for that. Being able to talk to him, especially right during the time of the combine, being able to get some insights as to what coaches will be looking for in the drills. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am for this. It's going to be a fun time, and you guys definitely have to be there for it.
Yeah, man, it was kind of nice for you to invite us into a group chat so I could get to talk to him a little bit. I need to get on there a little bit more and get to know him just a little bit better and everything that he does and stuff like that. It's always going to be really great to get some of this kind of insight. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to him. Obviously, we like to break down these prospects and just as much as everybody else does, but to have an actual coach, a guy that does it for a real, like for a living, is going to be a great thing, a great part of this podcast. It's for me though, it's great, man. I got to go and hang out with everybody as far as the family goes. Had a doctor's appointment, check on the baby today. It was great. So, I mean, everything's going great on my end. But guys, today we're going to go into a pretty decent topic of discussion regarding some of the Broncos trade rumors coming up over the last couple of days, specifically in the acquisition of Stefon Diggs, wide receiver out of Minnesota, and also Darius Slay, the cornerback from Detroit. Now, this is kind of a big discussion going on. There's a lot of people that are not sure with Stefon Diggs. You've got some of the controversy with him, being vocal about not getting the football and everything like that, just the way that he was utilizing the offense and whatnot in Minnesota. But also at the same time, there's just a little bit of this stuff as far as him being a similar player to Courtland Sutton. Now, Erick, you and I are kind of in the same statement as this, and I think that a couple other guys here on the website are as well. These two players are nothing alike.
They're really not. And the biggest thing is while Stefon Diggs can go get those 50-50 balls, that's not his game. That is Courtland Sutton's game. Stefon Diggs he's going to get open with his routes with quickness. And if you want to compare him to a Broncos receiver, you want to compare him to former Broncos receiver Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's much closer to that than he is Courtland Sutton. I mean, their size difference is a very obvious one, and that's a big reason why their play styles are so different. Then you also have to factor in their speed and their quickness. And just overall route running ability. Courtland Sutton did, develop a little bit more his second year as a route runner, but he still isn't close to that same level that Stefon Diggs is or Emmanuel Sanders is. So there's definitely a huge difference there in just every aspect of it. And I think that for the Broncos, a team that's looking to add more weapons on the offense, Stefon Diggs would be a good counterpart to add just because of what he brings to the table. I mean, it's all about complementary skill sets, and he has that complementary skill set. People want to talk about him being a diva. Well, there's a lot more issues going on in Minnesota. People forget that Adam Thielen was having issues with Kirk Cousins. Stefon Diggs is having issues with Kirk Cousins. People are forgetting that back in Washington, there was a lot of issues with Kirk Cousins and his personality and how he rubbed receivers the wrong way. And not just receivers, but everybody on offense the wrong way. So there's a lot of issues going on there. And among many other things that are going on behind the scenes that I've just heard mumblings about. So it's understandable that the guy wants out. Is he handling it the best way? I can agree that he isn't. That is kind of worrisome with how he's handling it. But I think that putting him in with Pat Shurmur, a guy who knows how to handle him, who had one of the best years out of Stefon Diggs, with Case Keenum at quarterback, and an offense with Drew Lock, man, that's something that's going to be very, very big for the Broncos and just help them a lot. And before we continue going on about the talk, I just want to say thank you, Paul. It's nice. It's glad you're here. It's nice seeing you in here. Man, we enjoy having you guys in here.
It's
so
great.
You know, man.
I was just getting ready to grab that for Paul. Hey, Paul, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate you guys. To continue our conversation, though, with Stefon Diggs, yeah, he does have the ability to go deep and take the top off the defense, but it's not just that. I mean, he's a very nuanced route runner, very, very quick, very agile kind of a player. He does use his speed to win a lot, but that's not his best attribute as a wide receiver. I mean, he's very quick off the line of scrimmage. He can win at all three levels of the defense, especially over the middle of the field and as a slot receiver. And the Minnesota Vikings like to use him a lot as in the slot and coming across the middle of the formation, with then Thielen coming across as well, using these mesh concepts that you like to hear about. So, I mean, there's a lot of good ways that the Broncos could potentially use Stefon Diggs, even not as just that deep burner speed threat. Now, we're talking a 27-year-old wide receiver, 6 foot flat, roughly 195 pounds or so. So just, I mean, the body types as well. There's not really a comparison there. So he is going to be kind of that prototypical slot receiver. And Eric, you and I were talking just briefly before we got started here. I mean, you did mention Emmanuel Sanders. Think about what Deshaun Hamilton has done, not necessarily being the greatest athlete that you're going to see, but that's kind of the role that you would potentially see Stefon Diggs fill for the Broncos. Now, with the contract that Stefon Diggs has right now, going into year 2 of a 5-year deal, I believe is what it was. 5-year deal, $72 million contract extension he signed last year, with cap hits at $14.5 million this year, 15 over the next 2, and then 12 in the final year of his deal, and very low dead money hit. Now, with that being the case, you don't have to worry about paying this guy long term. He's already long term under a contract. What does that mean for his value?
I think that it's very favorable for teams that, I mean, it is. I mean, it's a cheaper deal. I mean, we see other receivers getting $13-14 million for even being a number 2 guy, and he's going to be less than that because his cap hits are going to be lowered because of trading for him. Minnesota's going to be eating that dead money, and teams are going to be using the whole stronger draft class. They're going to be using that, hey, he wants out of Minnesota. And I see people in the chat calling him a diva and that he's a drama queen and stuff like that, and he's really not. There's a lot of issues. I mean, I know how it comes off of it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's publicly making it very clear he wants out of Minnesota. But there are a lot of issues there that most receivers, if they are dealing with that, they are going to want out. Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, those guys had issues with Kirk Cousins as well. And there was a lot of speculation prior to the trade deadline that Adam Thielen would be traded because of those issues. But using all that stuff, teams are going to use that to try and knock his value down. I think what you're going to be looking at is maybe something that Denver gave up for Emmanuel Sanders. Sanders wanted out. Sanders was on his last year of his deal, which for the San Francisco 49ers, a team who was competing, that is a lot more valuable. They were driving for a thing. They wanted that contract because of the cap situation that they were in, are going to be in this year. They don't have that much cap, so they didn't want to be long-term in it. So I think that similar to what Emmanuel Sanders got, a 3rd and 4th round pick, is kind of what Minnesota is going to be looking at for Stefon Diggs. I mean, obviously it's hard to say without knowing how his market's going to be. The hotter the market, the more that the price is going to go up. But I think that would be the most that Denver would be willing to give up. And I can't blame them if they do go that route. Again, great fit, not the biggest drama queen like everybody's making him out to be. And the whole thing about him wanting the ball a little bit more is the issue is he was getting open quite a bit for the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins was just dumping it off to the running back. That's an issue with him, is if he is open, he's going to want the ball, as every receiver does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, every wide receiver is a diva. They all want the ball. They all think they're wide open. Now, we got an interesting question coming from Albert Knoppers here before we get to our super chats here. Stefon Diggs before Amari Cooper, who is a free agent. Now, I'm just going to kind of kick this one off a little bit. And you and I discussed this before we got going, just about the trade compensation and everything like that. The Dallas Cowboys drastically overpaid for Amari Cooper when they traded for him, giving up a 1st round pick. That was the Raiders saw that the Cowboys were desperate and they took advantage of that. Now, as far as going and getting Amari Cooper in free agency, I don't know, man. There's a lot of money that's going to be tied up into that young man. He is a true number 1 wide receiver. He's a very good wide receiver. He's able to win by himself. He's kind of quarterback transcendent, more or less. And I think that if the Broncos are going to go that route and they do want to go get Amari Cooper, they're not going to be able to pay that. I mean, you might as well go get somebody who's going to be like a Stefon Diggs, who's already under contract, and he's a perfect complement to Courtland Sutton, who I don't think that Amari Cooper is necessarily that perfect complement to Courtland Sutton. And also, you have to pay Courtland Sutton a few years later down the road.
I think Amari Cooper is actually a very good complement to Courtland Sutton and just brings in another element to the Broncos offense. My issue is what you're going to be paying him. I'm not comfortable going out and paying Amari Cooper $18 million plus on an average per year basis when in possibly next year, you're going to have to go pay Cortland Sutton. Not doing it. I mean, with Stefon Diggs' deal, it's not as much. There's not as much money tied into him long term. There's ways out of that deal down the road. So I'm fine with taking on that money, which is good wide receiver, which is, I mean, very fair for a wide receiver too. I mean, it's under the market value for wide receiver twos. And you have a wide receiver one. Why are you going to go pay wide receiver one money to Amari Cooper when you're going to have to pay wide receiver one money to Cortland Sutton potentially as early as next year, if not next year, the year after? Doesn't make sense to me. I know a lot of Bronco fans want Amari Cooper, but the financial aspect of it just doesn't make sense. And Terry Randall comes in and he asks about Prince Amukamara, who was released today, and how much do we pay? Well, Prince Amukamara being released from the Chicago Bears was something that was actually super expected, simple reason of their cap issues. I think that Denver could possibly get him for like $7-8 million a year based on age, his relationship with Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio is a defensive mind that he absolutely, I guess, right term would be idolizes. Loves playing for him, loves playing with, just in his scheme, just loves everything about him. So I can see him and just being willing to come to Denver for a little bit cheaper and just like, hey, I can help you. I know the scheme. Let me in.
And he'd be a great complementary kind of a player for what the Broncos already have. And another guy that we're going to talk about here soon with Darius Slay. Now, Darius Slay is potentially a top 5 cornerback. You called him a top 5 cornerback. He's definitely one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. A cornerback room that features Darius Slay on one side, Prince Amukamara on the other, and then Bryce Callahan playing in the slot if he comes back healthy, which all signs are pointing that he's going to come back like that, really kind of speaks to me a little bit about what Vic Fangio had in Chicago with Kyle Fuller, Prince Amukamara, and Bryce Callahan roaming that secondary as well. Yep. And then you have that top tier safety in Justin Simmons playing the backside. Really kind of the only piece that you're missing there is an elite coverage linebacker. Now we've got another super chat coming in here. Let me see here. Paul coming back in, and he says, if we got Diggs, what round would you draft a slot wide receiver, and who would you choose? Thank you. Now, I think that if you're going to go get Stefon Diggs, he's going to be your slot wide receiver, and you're really going to look for that deep kind of a real deep threat. And at that particular point, I mean, there's still, depending on what you gave up for Stefon Diggs, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go and get somebody like a Jalen Reagor in the second round if he's still available. Like, why wouldn't you? That's another, that true deep threat, that true burner that you could get for the wide receiver position. That's actually a pretty good get there. Now, Eric, as far as your draft knowledge goes, how about some later round guys that the Broncos could go target that would be even a better complement to Stefon Diggs and Cortland Sutton?
Well, I think one thing that I'd be looking at for this is depending on who falls, I'd be willing to take a wide receiver there at 15. If Henry Ruggs is there, getting Stefon Diggs, for me, in my opinion, with my evaluation of Henry Ruggs, that makes me a lot more comfortable taking Henry Ruggs there. Adding that speed, having Stefon Diggs there, who's a great route runner, being able to work with him on improving his routes, that just increases the value of Henry Ruggs for me there at 15. So if he's there at 15, I'd definitely go that route. But if you're looking at a little bit later, then I think maybe a guy like John Hightower, who brings that speed, Lynn Bowden out of Kentucky, who's more offensive weapon, but having him work with, again, Stefon Diggs is a good route runner, working on those routes and everything, I think that could really boost his value. J.D. Spielman is another option, but that's a guy that you're looking more as a slot. And this is a whole nother aspect of it too, is with Stefon Diggs, he can play outside, he can play the slot. So you're not pigeonholed into having to go get a slot guy. You're not pigeonholed to having to go get a number 2 guy. And you're wide receiver, X receiver, whatever it is. I can never remember. I can never remember which is which. But you're not pigeonholed into having to go get that. You have the versatility in your options. But John Hightower would be a name that really stands out for me. Once you get to like that 4th or 5th round, Lynn Bowden again is another one, as I mentioned before. And there's a bunch. I mean, this receiver class is the best one, and everybody's making a big deal because I think it was Daniel Jeremiah came out and said that like 21 receivers can go in the first 3 rounds. That's a little bit rich for me, but that is just showing how historic this class actually is. It would not shock me at all if we broke 20 receivers in the first 3 rounds. It's that good of a class.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you have as far as just receivers in your top 100? Your top 100 players in this draft? What, 19, 20 at least? I think I have 18 receivers in my top 100 players right now. Okay. Now, another super chat donation coming in here. Stu McPeak, always good to see you, Stu. We appreciate you, man. I really like that hoodie that you got the other day. That's kind of nice. We need to get one of those for us. Now, to go back to the conversation just a little bit, going back to Darius Slay here, the compensation that you're going to be giving up for Darius Slay as far as to acquire him, what, second, third round picks, something like that. Then also on top of that, he's in the last year of his deal going into 2020, so you're going to have to sign him to a contract extension. Now, Erick, second, third round pick, and then maybe what kind of a deal are you looking at on potentially giving Darius Slay? I mean, Xavier Howard, the cornerback in Miami, is making $15.05 million a year on an average per year basis. Darius Slay probably going to eclipse that. It's going to be the highest paid cornerback on the market. What do you think?
I think that one thing you have to be careful of is his age. I mean, he is younger than Chris Harris Jr., but he's still getting up there. You tend to see a drop off in cornerbacks and their ability on the field. So you want to be cautious about that. But I think with the Vic Fangio scheme, it helps cover up for age a little bit more than most other schemes, just because it takes a lot of pressure off of the cornerbacks with the play that you get from the safeties and what the linebackers are asked to do. So I think that Denver, what they would ideally want to do is try to put most of the guaranteed money in the first 2 years, maybe a little bit in year 3, just to kind of balance it out. And I think at most you're looking at a 4-year deal, option on that 4th year, depending on just everything, age, how much he declines, everything like that. But one thing that we have to factor in is that this is a guy that Vic Fangio wants. Vic Fangio, who was coach for the Chicago Bears defense for all those years, playing 2 games against Darius Slay for all those years, and he wants this guy. That should speak loudly to fans that this is a guy that our head coach, a great defensive mind, really wants.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very true statement there. And now David Cromo, a good friend of the show, do you see the Broncos signing 2 free agent cornerbacks? Now, kind of to go along with this conversation, I actually do. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was already smoke with Darius Slay coming to Denver last year at the trade deadline. Obviously, there was talks about the Broncos shipping Chris Harris Jr., potentially a third round pick or something like that in exchange for Darius Slay. So there's already some embers burning in that kind of a fire. And then with Prince Amukamara being released today, I mean, it's just that's too savvy of a pick. Like there's no way you can really go around that. Like it's just a perfect match, a perfect combination. And like I said, to get an elite cornerback group of Prince Amukamara, Darius Slay, and Bryce Callahan, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why would you not want to do that and to then fortify the back end of this defense for, the next at least 2 years? So go ahead.
For me, the way I'm looking at it is I think that Denver makes at most 3 big additions to their cornerback room. I could see one being a trade. I mean, it's not just Darius Slay. AJ Boye is out there. Denver's had interest in him before. But one signing, maybe not a big signing unless they miss out on AJ Boye or Darius Slay and they end up going after Byron Jones and they're willing to give him a big contract, which I've heard that they're not really willing to give him a market-setting deal. So I think that maybe like a Prince Amukamara works. Maybe they trade for Darius Slay, AJ Boye gets cut, and they go after him and line both of those guys, which I think would be all that much better than just Prince Amukamara and Darius Slay. I mean, AJ Boye is a little bit better than Prince Amukamara. But that's a big thing there. And then I think that basically how I see it going down is they bring in 2 some way before the draft. Either both signings, both trades, or 1 and 1, and then they bring one in with a top 100 pick in the draft. That's how I see it, as just 3 additions to it, with Bryce Callahan's injury history, Isaac Yiadom not showing the development that's needed, Devontae Bosby, and who knows what he's going to be like coming back from his injury. A lot of concerns there. I think that they're going to want to be trying to shore this up. And I know that all the talk and speculation is that the Broncos, and there's some truth to it too, that the Broncos want to go and fortify their defense through the offseason, through free agency and everything, and then a draft offense. I think that there are a couple positions that they will also still draft and come draft in.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. Now, Ecklick Stormore coming in on the super chat with the $2 donations. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it, man. Happy Friday, fellas. Diggs for Hamilton in a third?
I'd be down. I don't think that I know I get a lot of flack for this, but Hamilton didn't show me enough. Having 44% of his yards in the final 2 games just doesn't scream like, oh yeah, this guy's great. And I loved him pre-draft, but I just don't see him being the kind of piece that the Broncos need in Pat Shurmur's offense. I think that at most he is a good number 4 piece if they can't find a better number 2 and number 3 receiver. So I'd be willing to part ways with him. I think that Gary Kubiak would be a little bit more easier, I guess, to find how to make him work in that Vikings offense with the other people that they have in there with Adam Thielen, with Olabisi Johnson, Kyle Rudolph. I think Hamilton fits a lot better into that than he does with Pat Shermer's scheme. So I'd be for it. I just don't think that it actually happens.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds a little weak to me. I mean, I would be all for it. Absolutely, it's great, but I think that you're gonna have to add something that could give Minnesota the incentive to actually pull the trigger on that. So it's. I don't know that it actually happens, but I'd be all for it. Now, going to run to Black Knight here. I asked Chad and Zach this yesterday. Why is no one in the media not talking about Mackenzie Alexander? He's younger, 26. He's got 4.5 sacks with a fumble recovery and 2 picks. Now, I'm assuming Mackenzie Alexander, the cornerback out of Minnesota. To me, that, I don't know. Slot cornerback, not necessarily the greatest in coverage. And you look at the Minnesota secondary right now. Xavier Rhodes struggled this last year. Trey Waynes is probably on his way out here soon as well. Why wouldn't they bring Mackenzie Alexander back?
That's my big thing is I think that Mackenzie Alexander is going to end up being back with the Minnesota Vikings in some way, shape, or form. Like, basically meaning I'm not sure what his contract's going to be like. I just think that they bring him back. But my thing too is that his playing coverage, while solid, wasn't good enough to sit there and make me be like, oh yeah, I got to go get this guy. I mean, basically he was their second best corner out there, but he was allowing a reception every 8.2 snaps. He allowed 414 yards, an NFL rating of 90.2, which isn't too bad, allowing 1.12 yards per snap. Like those are fine numbers, but they're not great numbers. He is still young and can be developed, but I'm just not seeing it. He was their number 3 receiver, so he didn't get quite as many targets as the other guys did. But it's just, again, he was okay, not good or great, and I don't think that he makes a huge difference to the Broncos cornerback room.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Ecklich's coming back in and he says, I heard the Broncos were interested in Byron Boykin, I think, from the Eagles. I certainly hope not. I don't necessarily, I haven't heard anything as far as that goes. Now, with as far as the free agency discussion goes and potential rumors that you might have heard coming out of Dove Valley and whatnot, what other players are the Broncos potentially looking at? I know the interior defensive line is a need, potentially interior offensive line as well, with Connor McGovern scheduled to hit free agency and Ronald Leary more than likely on his way out. Are there any players that around the NFL that the Broncos potentially have some interest in to fill any of those holes?
There definitely are. I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos end up calling the Chicago Bears about Akeem Hicks. There's been a lot of rumors going around about how he isn't viewed as the best fit in the Chuck Pagano defense, so that they might be willing to move on from him, especially after the injuries he had this last year. So I can see some things there. There's a lot of talk about Calais Campbell getting cut out of Jacksonville, and Denver had interest in him a few years back. Great player, a little bit older, so he's gonna fit what they want to do on defense. Is not necessarily getting old on defense, but getting in guys who can come in, play right away, make an impact, and allowing them the freedom to wait until they draft young on defense until like next year. So that's kind of how I view it. And there's a couple other defensive linemen out there as well. And actually, this plays into a couple comments out there that I want to come out and say. And then Mehmet Demirci, I think. I'm not sure how you say your name. I'm also terrible with pronouncing names, and I apologize if I completely butchered it. And he asks, what do you guys think about getting Robert Quinn, someone that stays healthy and can play the 5 technique? I don't think he can. I think Robert Quinn's best spot is as that 7 technique and a 4-3 front. And I have a lot of concerns about his power to hold up as a 5 tech.
Yeah, and then especially going against double teams in the running game. I just don't think he actually has the ability to do that.
And then Yordi Lopez comes in about thoughts on getting Everson Griffin. I've actually had a lot of people in my DMs and tweets on Twitter timeline, on Twitter, obviously, asking about Everson Griffin and his fit with the Broncos. He's an edge rusher, similar in size to Von Miller. He's not a guy that's going to come in and play your 5-tech spot. And with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, I'm not paying big money for Everson Griffin. He had an outstanding year this last year. He was probably a top 5 pass rusher this last season. So I'm not doing it. Like, I like the player, and if Denver had a need, I'd totally be for it, but there's no need for it.
Yeah, that's a big thing with Everson Griffin. I mean, he's actually slept on. He's probably one of the top 5, top 10, probably top 7 guys in all of the NFL as far as edge rushers goes. He's always around the passer. He's always making plays in the running game. He just doesn't fit, and there's no necessarily need that the Broncos have to add another edge rusher outside of probably a potential draft pick. If they want to go get Jeremiah Tauchu back in free agency, he's an unrestricted free agent this year. That'd be a guy that I would like to see the Broncos bring back as far as the leadership role. And he also played very well, especially over the latter half of the season. Now, Austin Ryder coming in, and he says Corey Littleton should be a top priority in free agency outside. Agree or disagree, and also to let go of Todd Davis. Now, Corey Littleton, as far as a coverage linebacker goes, yes, absolutely. I think that would be a great fit in Vic Fangio's scheme, but I'm not necessarily so sure about him in the running game. And losing what Todd Davis does in the running game alongside of what Alexander Johnson does, you might be taking a step backwards there. Corey Littleton would be a great get for the Broncos if they could manage to find a way to keep him and Todd Davis and Alexander Johnson all under contract for the next couple of years, just because they offer such a complementary skill set to each other. But with losing Todd Davis and next to Alexander Johnson in the running game, if you're going to get rid of Davis, I don't agree with that move.
See, I disagree. I think that getting Corey Littleton, inserting him next to Alexander Johnson is a tremendous upgrade over Alexander Johnson and Todd Davis. Yes, you're not getting as quite the impact that Todd Davis brings against the run as you are with Corey Littleton, though he is still a very good run defender. The issue is that you have to have a complementary skill set. You'll hear that a lot from me throughout the whole offseason process as complementary skill sets. Alexander Johnson, that's your run defender. That's the guy that you're going to go have take on blocks, shedding blocks, and trying to blow up run plays. Corey Littleton, he's your cover guy. He's the guy that's going to be taking tight ends and running backs downfield in coverage, trying to basically sort through the garbage and try to make a play by avoiding blockers. Those two fit together. With Todd Davis, you don't have that spot for him. You don't have the depth that the Broncos have. You don't have the coverage depth. You have the run defender depth. That's what Josie Jewell brings to the table. That's what Alexander Johnson brings to the table. That's what everybody that they have brings to the table. They got to get better in coverage, and Corey Littleton does that. I think that it would be a tremendous get for the Broncos to get Corey Littleton and really upgrade what they bring at the linebacker group, what they have at the linebacker core, because it gives Vic Fangio that athletic cover linebacker that this defense desperately needs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I'm a Todd Davis fan. I think that there's a lot to work with there. So
don't get me wrong. I like Todd Davis. I think that he is a lot better than what fans give him credit for. And I would love to keep him around for depth purposes as well. But he opens up some cap space, but I'm just not sure if keeping him is like the right move, because then you're just getting cluttered. If Corey Littleton goes down, then you're still lacking a cover element in the Broncos linebacker core. And I mean, unless they go and get rid of Josie Jewell, which I don't see happening, it's Todd Davis is the odd man out. They can get rid of him and free up a lot of cap room.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. That really is a fair assessment. Now to move on just a little bit here. DJ Reader or Damon Harrison. Now I'm going to kick this off just a little bit with Damon Harrison. Obviously, Snacks, very good player against the run, and offers just a little bit of pass rush chops. Not the greatest as a pass rusher, but DJ Reader, is kind of a do-it-all guy, younger guy, very good player. With Damon Harrison, there were thoughts about him potentially going into retirement this year. So, I mean, where is his heart at? It would be the biggest question to me. Also, what is the value on DJ Reader in this upcoming free agency class?
See, I'm not sure on Reader. I think a lot of fans think that he's a really good fit for the Broncos defense. I think he's a fine fit. He's probably on my free agent or expected free agent. He's probably like somewhere in like bottom 3 in the top 10 of guys that I'd be looking at. Damon Harris, he's not even on my list. And the simple reason for that is he's a run defending nose tackle. He really doesn't offer much as a pass rusher, and he plays less than 50% of snaps. He's really great at what he does, but there's other ways that the Broncos can go and just do that. I mean, they have Mike Purcell, who does a lot of the same things, though not as good, for a lot cheaper. Yeah. For a huge, major fraction of the cost.
Yes.
So if you want your 2-down run defender, Mike Purcell.
He's already on the roster. He's already there.
Well, he's a restricted free agent, but
yeah, I mean, he's going to be on the roster. They're probably going to tender him anyways. Yeah. But now, Bawana Beast comes in. Bawana Beast, good to see you in the chat, man. We appreciate you coming in and joining us. He had a question earlier. I couldn't find it about the contract that DJ Humphries signed and what it meant for the overall value of the free agent market on the offensive line. So Humphries was given $45 million after his first full season, and teams are desperate for line help, even though the Cardinals could draft a lineman. Now, what does that mean specifically for the offensive line group? And maybe not the tackle class, but just the guard class. Brandon Scherf is potentially an option for the Broncos.
I don't think the Broncos spend money on the offensive line. I think that what help they add through the draft, and I mean maybe a cheap signing like B.J. Finney just because of his familiarity with Mike Munchak. But if DJ Humphrey's contract just cemented any kind of feeling for me and should cement any kind of feeling for Broncos fans, it should be lay off Garrett Bowles because Garrett Bowles isn't nearly as bad as DJ Humphreys, and he was the best tackle since the bye week. In case you haven't heard that. And he's cheaper. Pick up that 5th-year option. He hasn't had injury issues. Pick up that 5th-year option, which right now is only guaranteed for injury. It's going to be cheaper because look, DJ Humphreys. Yes, Arizona's paying him to be a starter, but he's not good enough to be a starter. He shouldn't be a starter in the NFL, and he just got starter money. That is ridiculous, and that is what you're going to have to do for offensive line and the talent in the NFL anymore, even mediocre talent, because it is such a weak position throughout the NFL. You pay the guys that are good enough, and teams that have them good enough rarely let them go. Let them go.
Yeah,
so pick up that option.
Yeah, pick up the option. I agree with that. And if you're going to go and add to the offensive tackle depth, why not just do it at 15? If you got the opportunity to get somebody like Tristan Wirfs that could play, after Garrett Bowles, if they don't decide to pick up the option, go get you a young guy. Like what the free agent market, I could see him going and getting, like you said, BJ Finney. I would really like to see him target Brandon Scherf if the price is right there. So I mean, it's just not really. I don't know. Now, Black Knight coming in, and he says, what are the chances on Denver getting Chris Jones? Now, rumors coming out of Kansas City are they are thinking about putting the franchise tag on Chris Jones, at least the last that I had seen. So if he does actually hit the open market, he's going to be a very high priority for the Denver Broncos defense. And you can believe he's going to be a very high priority for just about, 31 other teams in the entire NFL. Everyone is going to want to get Chris Jones. Now, Eric, what do you think the chances are that Denver can get him?
I don't think that Denver will actually be on him. I think that they'll be looking at different ways, and which sucks because I'm a huge Chris Jones fan, as much as I hate to say it because he plays for the Chiefs. Absolutely love his game. And just the issue is that more and more it's sounding like the Chiefs somehow are going to find a way to franchise tag him. I think that, honestly, that would be a mistake after the resources they put into their offensive line depth that they've had the last couple of years, or their defensive line depth, that just not sure that, giving him a $20 million deal plus giving Mahomes a $40 million plus deal on an average per year basis. I'm just not seeing that. I'm not sure how the Kansas City Chiefs continue to field a competitive team, basically putting $60 million a year out of a $200 million cap without drafting very well, which the Chiefs have had a lot of issues drafting. So
and they don't have a lot of picks this year either.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of picks this year either.
I don't agree. I think that ultimately they will end up tagging him. I don't agree that they should, which part of that that isn't affected by me wanting him on the Broncos because I don't think the Broncos will be after him anyways. I just think that from a roster building perspective, I think that would be a mistake for them just after the resources they've used on it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
sorry, Eric, I was going to come in. We got Yordi Lopez coming in with another question here. He says, do you guys think Brandon Cooks trade could happen? Because the Rams really need cap space. And you're absolutely correct. However, I don't necessarily think that Brandon Cooks would be – I mean, as far as a speed guy and a decent route runner, he can get open using his speed shiftiness and more of an offensive weapon than actually a true wide receiver. I think that would be an all right fit, but I don't think that's necessary for the Broncos. If they're going to go get a guy, go get somebody that offers that 3 levels of the defense. Well, I guess Diggs or Cooks does offer that, but I would rather go get Stefon Diggs. If the Broncos are going to trade for anybody, Stefon Diggs would be the guy that I would want to go get.
Yeah, I think there's better options than Brandon Cooks. I mean, if you're not getting Stefon Diggs, go to the draft, go to a free agent receiver. I like Brandon Cooks as a player. I just think that he's quite overrated, and I can't remember his contract details off the top of my head.
It's a big one.
I'm just not a fan of making that move. And then we did also have a question from King Stacy. He asks about thoughts on getting Prince Amukamara or AJ Boye, and we did talk about this a little bit earlier in the show. But just real quick, I would actually like those 2 moves. I mean, Denver getting both of them, I think would be fantastic for them. But Prince Amukamara, I don't want to say it's a given, but I would not be shocked at all if Denver at least makes calls there. If they have communications trying to work out a deal, and it wouldn't be shocked me at all if Denver's calling the Jacksonville Jaguars about a trade for AJ Boye. I think both of them make a lot of sense. They fit the scheme. Prince Amukamara knows the scheme. So I like both moves personally.
Yeah, that's either one. To me, Darius Slay, if you can go get Darius Slay, do it. That's like you said, top 5 cornerback in the league. very good player. Big play Darius Slade, 19 career interceptions, 103 pass breakups over the course of his 7-year career, something like that. 29 years old, so he's still got a little bit of gas in the tank, and you can get him 3-4 years on a it's going to be a record-setting deal for the cornerback market. But at the same time, with the Broncos having, you get rid of Joe Flacco, you get rid of Ronald Leary, you get up to $84 million in cap space. There's no reason why you can't sign him to that big record-setting deal in the free agency market. So to me, that would be the move that I would prefer. But AJ Bouye is also a very good get. I mean, him and Jalen Ramsey formed a very lethal cornerback duo down in Jacksonville for a couple of years down there. And I mean, obviously the Jacksonville Jaguars needed to move on from Jalen Ramsey. He wanted out. They traded him to the Rams. But Bouye was still down there and balling. I mean, he's playing very good football. Now, Bawanabe's coming back in, and he says, what are the feelings on the new collective bargaining agreement that the owners have proposed, and where is that kind of heading here, Eric? I know you have a little bit of information on that.
Well, basically is the NFLPA, the representatives, the 32 representatives are going to want to sit down face-to-face, talk about it with the owners, because there are some issues with it. I think that it's not as terrible for players as a lot of people in the public media are making it out to be, but it's still not perfectly fair for them. My biggest issue with it for the players is that whole 17th game thing about the money and capping what they can get for it and everything like that. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like the minimum spending going from 89% to 90% over a 3-4 year base, I guess would be the way. Proper words escape me. I think that 91, 92% would be fair. And then not capping it on that, as well as just trying to figure out something else to do with that 17th game and the paying for that. But I think that, raising the minimum salaries, making the fact that the 5th year options become fully guaranteed no matter what, the performance bonuses, for rookies on their deals, all that stuff like that I think that's actually very fair for players, and it just comes down to that 17th game. That's the only thing I don't like about it.
Yeah, it's a lot more fair to the players than a lot of people are actually talking about. And yeah, they're going to continue to negotiate it. It's not going to just come down to, the owners propose this, the players are going to agree to it. There's going to be some punching and counter punching. And I imagine the 17th game check is going to be a big part of that. And you could potentially see that number double. I mean, as like a counter proposal, maybe even triple, 750,000, whatever. I don't know that would probably be the thing, but I mean, you could potentially see that number double to give it a little bit more fairness as far as the cap to the players that are making, $8, $9, $10 million a year, who are pushing more towards the $1 million per game check, to lose 30% or to only make 30% of your guaranteed weekly salary. I don't know that I would agree to something like that either. So we're going to see some more negotiations and stuff like that. It's obviously a very fluid situation, and it's hopefully going to get resolved sooner rather than later. But this could drag on for another couple months, guys. Now, we're going to only be able to take a couple more questions here, guys. So get them in while you can. Boise Lestate comes in. He says, well, how does Bryce Callahan factor into Denver's plan at cornerback in 2020? We talked about that just a little bit earlier. All signs are pointing to him coming back fully healthy. He's going to be projected as a starting slot cornerback for the Broncos in the nickel. Bill 1293 comes in. He says, can you see Elway moving up for Riggs, Judy, or Lamb? We kind of talked about this last week, and Eric, you and I are kind of one and the same on this. Moving up is probably not the best thing for the Broncos. We both prefer the Broncos to move down. Now, if you do fall in love with the CD Lamb and you want to keep him out of Oakland's hands at number 12, you move up to number 11, something like that, then sure, I could see that. But at the same time, the value there, I mean, there's such a good wide receiver class. Missing out on Lamb, yeah, he's the best wide receiver in the class, but you can still make up for that, especially if you go get like a Stefon Diggs.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that my biggest thing is I'm always for adding resources. It's typically not favorable for a team to trade up, give up extra resources, and draft a player. Typically doesn't pan out as well doing that. So I'm never a fan for trading up. I mean, for Ruggs, Judy, or Lamb, with how deep this draft is, I just don't see the value in doing it.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let's get another couple one, and kind of along the same lines here. Eric, could you see Elway trading up for the first round for an offensive lineman? I mean, so the one that would be Tristan Wirfs.
I think Tristan Wirfs would be the only one. I think that he'd have to fall out of the top 10 for that to happen. I don't see it happening, but if he does, I can see Denver trying to move up just because he has that positional versatility to play right guard as well as they develop and work with him to be a long-term left tackle or even right tackle, because Jawan James with his health, if he gets hurt this year, he's not with the Broncos in 2021. So there's definitely the options there. I don't think they end up trading up for him, but I mean, of course, maybe he falls a little bit and they feel more comfortable doing it.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, Ninja Cow coming in, he says, I think bringing in Corey Littleton, re-signing Derek Wolfe, and relying on Draymond Jones and Purcell to be the regulars, and drafting some late-round guys like Tyler Clark would be the best move for this Broncos defense. Eric, I mentioned Tyler Clark when we did our mock draft a couple of weeks ago. You had some choice words. What do you think of Tyler Clark, the D-line out of Georgia, right?
Yes, I'm not a fan of him. I'm just not. I think that this is a very weak defensive line class, but I think even later in the thing, later in the draft, there's a lot better options than Tyler Clark. I'm not seeing him being more than like that fifth guy on a rotation that plays maybe 10 snaps. Just not seeing it with his game. Just not seeing it. Not with him.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, Bawana Beast coming in with another really good question here. He says, early call, what first-round player do you feel will be a bust? Now, I know you did an analytical piece on the wide receivers in this class, and the analytics points to a guy that's heavily mocked to the Denver Broncos at number 15 overall.
Well, it doesn't really – all it says is that based on his performance, his breakout age, and his dominator rating in college, that he has a least likely chance of being successful. But it's still not like an astronomical thing. I mean, it's not a huge drop-off compared to others, but although there is a very – long shot. I mean, I only identified like 11 receivers out of hundreds. There's like 200 and some odd receivers, 300 and some odd. But I think if I had to pick one player to be a bust, it would probably, my gut feeling says, Christian Fulton, actually. I think that if he goes in the first round, I think that will end up being a bust. I think as good as he is in coverage, I think his tackling issues are going to be major issues. And if there are enough issues with him in coverage that can cause him a lot of problems at the NFL level. And I'm avoiding quarterback, just to be clear. I'm avoiding quarterback because quarterback's a little bit too easy.
Well, yeah, quarterback's always the position that's really easy to kind of take with Justin Herbert, the lack of growth that we saw over his senior year, that's a pretty easy finger to point right there. Justin Herbert could potentially bust out. A guy that I'm not really sold on, Grant Delpit. I'm not really sold on Grant Delpit. As far as a playmaker in the back end of the secondary, making plays on the football, sure. Just the tackling issues that he has. And I think there was more flash in the pan with how great the players were around him in that LSU defense. Don't get me wrong. Grant Delpit is a very fine player, very fine in coverage, and it gets his hands on a lot of footballs. I just think it's not going to translate. For some reason, it's a gut feeling to me. I don't really have any kind of a legit analysis for it. It's just a gut feeling to me that Grant Delpit is going to be the guy, that potential first rounder that's going to bust out pretty hard.
I think with Grant Delpit, I think his instincts and his football IQ are enough to at least make him, I don't think a great safety, but I think a successful safety in the NFL.
That's fair. All right, a couple more questions, guys. We're going to have to wrap this up here in just a minute. Bill comes back in, speaking more of this wide receiver stuff. Is there a better chance that CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy falls to number 15 overall?
CeeDee Lamb. I think CeeDee Lamb. I've heard pretty reliably that there is a certain team that Jerry Jeudy won't fall past. I mean, maybe Henry Ruggs, if he's there, might persuade the team to go the opposite way. But I don't think that Henry Ruggs makes it out of the top 10, and I don't think Jerry Jeudy makes it out of the top 13, 14, somewhere there.
Yeah, that's fair. Jerry Jeudy, to me, I mean, just the work that he does as far as a route runner, to have him in Denver would be so amazing. I've fallen in love with Jerry Jeudy's game. I mean, Henry Ruggs with the speed threat, there's so much to love there, obviously. There's some issues to work with there as well. Jerry Jeudy's just all around complete, man. He's got great hands. He's very patient, very good route runner, very good with the ball after the catch. Like, there's just so much to like there. Now, one more guy. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I actually have one question that would be our last one, and I actually want to answer this one just because of how it is. How can you coach up tackling in today's practicing scenarios? It's actually very difficult because tackling is you need to be very physical to really get the technique down. It's basically you are trying to implement the technique, get it ingrained in their brains to where it's just basic instinct, and then using what padded practice you can to really hammer it in and hope it sticks.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of coaches and other personnel on teams and everything like that tackling and certain blocking aspects of it are the hardest things to coach up with the changes to the practices nowadays.
Yeah, and that also brings in a very interesting kind of an interesting challenge as well. Keeping these players what's the word I'm looking for? Conditioned to the NFL game as far as the contact goes and the violence of this game. If you're taking that out of the practices, and yes, I understand you want to reduce the amount of hits and obviously the amount of possibilities of players getting broken bones and concussions, torn ligaments, stuff like that. Like I get that, but also it leads to poor form in games. Like there's a really finite line there where you're doing too much in practices and not nearly enough, because you can see some of these conditioning injuries. The guys with the poor form injuring themselves with poor form, head down tackling, launching themselves at initiating helmet to helmet contact, stuff like that. You've got to be able to incorporate some kind of tackling drills. And I kind of want to go back to 2013, 2014 with what the Seattle Seahawks were doing as far as incorporating the rugby style tackling, the wrap up and twist more than the straight launching and trying to initiate the contact forcefully with your shoulder and with your head area, wrap up, twist and turn and take those players down to the ground. Now, guys, that's going to do it. But before we get out of here, obviously, we've got just a couple matters of business. Make sure you guys are following us both. You can follow me on Twitter at Sanderson MHH, and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Notice the CK in the name. Also follow the show at DVDD_pod. And if you guys get a quick chance, run on over to the Apple Podcasts and give us a quick review. Let me see if I can find the banner here. Give us a quick review on the Huddle Up podcast. The Building the Broncos Huddle Up and Dove Valley Deep Divers falls under the Huddle Up podcast in the Apple Podcast review section. Go give us a 5-star rating and a quick review. Just help us get our content out to some more listeners. And also, if you like it, share it. Now, before we get out of here, we're just going to plug a couple things here. Obviously, next week we do have a special guest coming onto the show. He is a current college coach, and we're going to be talking about the combine, the NFL combine, and what these coaches are looking for as far as these prospect goes. What are the drills what are we trying to take away from most of these drills, and more of the finite details. Obviously, 40-yard dash for defensive linemen is not nearly as important as the 10-yard split. You're looking at that. I mean, the 3-cone drills, the time drill, stuff like that. It's showing explosive versatility and stuff in the vertical and stuff like that. And then a couple weeks after that, we do have another guest, another draft analyst coming on. We're going to talk a little bit of thoughts between Erick and another friend that we just kind of got in touch with here over the last couple of days. Now, Erick, any last words before we get out of here?
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. Now, thank you guys once again for coming in and joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers. You guys stay safe and take care. Have a great evening. Thank you much.